Well, hello everyone. Hi. Hi. So I wasn't planning to do that, but then again, this is about how you do transdisciplinary practice. You sort of have to feel the room to, to see where you're going. Um, let us start this process here this afternoon with a hand raise then, so I also get your attention. Who here thinks that you are really well experienced in transdisciplinary science? No one? Okay. So we have a couple of people. And who of you think that you have some experience in practicing transdisciplinarity? Some. Who of you think that you have like no experience whatsoever in practicing transdisciplinary science, but wish you could? Okay, nice. So the stronger part of the crowd is people that have some experience in transdisciplinary science. But since Alice, yeah, you rose your hand in this one, and she's really experienced, so I think that people might be putting things a little bit more to the low bar here. Okay. So, hello everyone, I'm Laila. I'm here representing the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research. I'm going to talk a little bit about my institution in a moment, but just to introduce the subject. So, why transdisciplinary science? I won't spend that much time in this slide here because I think that Jean's presentation went really well in showing why transdisciplinary science is needed, but just to highlight the importance of this and the context that makes the IAI work so hard to try to produce more transdisciplinary science in the Americas. So we have this really huge systematic crisis that we need to tackle, and they are all on top of each other and feeding from each other and interrelated in really complex ways, and we need to deal with that. And the main solutions that are presented come to you as the individual processes, right? Make sure to wash your hands, or try to collect your garbage in the right way, or close your tap. Of course, all of those things are really important, but they won't deal with the real problem, right? It's not just about closing the tap. So how do we produce a knowledge that can actually face those complex challenges in a way that is systematic, holistic? We need to bring to the table different perspectives on the same problem. And that's the heart of transdisciplinary science. So a little bit about my institution now. So the Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research is an intergovernmental organization. So we are not a government, we are not an NGO, we are like the UN. We came about through an international treaty that was signed in 1992 in Montevideo. As you all know, 1992 was the year of the Rio Summit, and this made a lot of traction and political engagement from countries in Latin America about the issues of global environmental change. So this was the context. And shortly after the Rio Summit, 12 presidents of the Americas came together to meet in Montevideo, Uruguay, and sign this treaty. And from then on, we got more and more parties. We encompass all the countries in the Americas that you might know the name by heart. There are many small islands inside Central America and the Caribbean that are not member states of the IAI. But all the other countries in the Americas are. So, but we are a weird intergovernmental organization because we are an institution made of scientists. We work with research. We are not like FAO or UNESCO or the UN itself that works with the political issues that affects all the governments. We are a science institution producing science and supporting science that is transnational to tackle global change. So our agreement is really visionary, so if you get interested in the international relations part of the IAI, please go ahead and check out our website. The information will be at the end of my presentation. Our main values are scientific excellence, international cooperation, full and open exchange of scientific information relevant to global environmental change. So basically, we work with funding, implementing, and communicating and elevating the knowledge that is already out there. So I'm going to offer just one or two examples of each. So we do implement scientific research about the priorities that are seen by the governments in the Americas related to global environmental change. We fund research, just like a normal research council, but all research that we fund is transnational. And we also communicate and elevate the science that's already out there. For instance, many countries in South America produce their own scientific outputs in either Spanish or Portuguese. And this keeps it in the circles that speak that language. So we translate some of the work that's being produced. We make also summaries of what has been produced in a specific item that could be of interest to governments. So we produce policy briefs in that sense as well. And all of this is related to our science agenda. We have a number of items that we cover in those activities of implementation, funding, and elevating that are related to climate change, biodiversity, and all related human dimensions of global change, also regarding fresh waters and oceans. These are some highlights, but there are other items also in our science agenda. So in our activities, we seek to make a direct communication with governments from our region to recognize which are the priorities. So this is one example of one of the 3 items that I showed you, that we do produce data also about our region. In this case, we interviewed people from all our member states to recognize which of the issues related to global environmental change are in their agenda for now. So we could recognize how we could support science that could tackle those issues. So climate action is not by chance that the mayor talks about that as well. Everyone is talking about the need to tackle climate change. The air and water quality comes next, and then biodiversity and ecosystem services. So most of the issues from what I read in the booklet of all of you are encompassed in those regional priorities that we have for global environmental change here in the Americas. And how does transdisciplinarity come to the fore in our institution? So the IAI was created in 1992, as I said, and at that point, the phrasing that was used was to tackle global change. It wasn't global environmental change yet, and it should be treated through interdisciplinarity. At that time, things were pretty based on the natural sciences and much on the atmospheric sciences. And throughout the 30 years that the IAI have been working, now 32, we have transitioned more and more towards the transformations to sustainability debate, transdisciplinary science, the science policy interface, and the idea of science diplomacy. So, and how is transdisciplinary science, in a nutshell, different from the other collaborative forms of science that has already been developed before? Interdisciplinarity refers to the form of science that requires the coordinated collaboration between researchers from different disciplines. And ideally, it depends on a methodological integration, but it remains constricted in the world of science. You can do interdisciplinary science inside the ivory tower, right? Transdisciplinary science is the step forward towards the real world. You need to engage with non-academic knowledges that know about the problem that you're trying to tackle. So this is in a nutshell. I am not Laila as the researcher here, so I'm not going to enter into in-depth conceptual. You're going to do that during the course. But this is the basic idea of transdisciplinary science. It's not just moving towards the boundaries of science itself, but also encompassing the real world and other knowledge systems. And this type of research is needed when a knowledge about a relevant problem is uncertain and where there's a great deal of stake for those involved in dealing with it. Such of those problems we were naming at the beginning of my presentation today, but also it could be at a local scale as well. When people are involved in the problem, you have to include them in thinking about the solutions to that problem. So this kind of research can grasp the complexity of problems, take into account the diversity of perceptions, and link abstract to case-specific knowledge to develop solutions and actions to promote the common good. So, the concept of transdisciplinarity was created in the 70s, but it gained a lot of traction, really, in the 90s and more in the 2000s, when the transformations to sustainability debate arose together with the promulgation of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we are in the international relations field, so this is pretty important. This is the kind of documents that we support our work, right? And it's going to get to you at some point. We're going to go down the scale to understand how the IAI works and how this could affect how we support science in our region. So it has an intrinsic relation to the transformations to sustainability debate and its different approaches to transdisciplinary science. So when you're talking about producing a knowledge that relates to the real world, you can be talking about really different things. It could be relating to a local community, it could be relating to a private sector entity such as a company or business. It could be relating to the government, and each of those practices have different characteristics. We try to encompass the broader perspective possible, but then again, we are bound by equity, diversity, and inclusion basics and recommendations. So I'm going now to jump to where we start to work with those concepts to the work that the IAI produces. So the main thing that the IAI does is to open calls to support research. But we don't support like the regular or traditional or mainstream research. We support research that is already transdisciplinary. So that means that all the scientific projects that we fund have at least one social scientist, at least one natural scientist, and at least one non-academic stakeholder involved in the project since the beginning of its inception. It's not a researcher seated in, ideally, right? Seated in an office, writing a proposal, and then getting a letter from an NGO to attach to it so it can be transdisciplinary. Our main goal is that the projects are really co-produced with people trying directly to deal with the problem. And then this is the last call that we closed the whole process of the project. That was the Small Grants Program, the role of ecosystem services in adaptation to global change for human well-being. Micaela Tribli, right here, was one of the PIs of the projects that were funded in that call. And you can see the different subjects that are encompassed. Almost all of the subjects that I saw in the booklet of your own research and interest lie in one of these projects or relate to one of these projects. So I really recommend, if you're interested also, to check out how a transdisciplinary process, what kind of products comes out of a transdisciplinary project. You can go ahead to the website and check out the project that most relates to your own research. And to provide some examples of how this happens and why we believe it's really important to have the transdisciplinary focus also from the side of the funders. Unlike many of the processes held by funding agencies, when we fund transdisciplinary science, we tend to accompany the process of developing the project, of implementing the project, and then trying to make the most of the outputs that come out of the project. So the IAI does not just like open the call, and then the project teams come, do their own work, and then file a report, and that's it. Normally, we host series of workshops like this one, but really smaller, with around like 20 to 30 people, of the different institutions involved in the different projects, so people can come together and talk about the challenges of trying to engage with different stakeholders, the challenges of recognizing how to communicate better the results, the challenges of producing policy briefs, and so on. So this is one of the examples. We did one for the small grants. We did a series of workshops just for the students engaged in the project, because we saw that students have the hardest part of the work of trying to engage with the local community. So they were shouting out for tools and activities that they could bring to the table when implementing the project. So we did a series of workshops directly to the students. And right here, you can see one of the products that came out of the MapFire project that was led by Liana Anderson. She is also a part of INPE, the same institution that Jean Meto is a part of. And they have produced a really amazing environmental education material about how to deal with fire in the Amazon. So this is one example of the kind of outputs that we expect from transdisciplinary projects. And then the IAI started to grow bigger and bigger in transdisciplinary science. And the IAI started to host this other institution that is called the Belmont Forum. So I'm not going to extend myself as well trying to explain the Belmont Forum. Also, if you're interested, you can ask me afterwards, or you can take a look online about what this is about. But it's a global partnership of science councils and funding agencies that work with transdisciplinary science for global environmental change. So many of those institutions are in Europe. Jean talked about the Belmont Forum this morning as well, briefly, just so you can recognize there is a really strong concentration of funders in Europe. The treaty that also established the Belmont Forum was signed in Vienna. And many of the funding agencies of the countries in Europe are a part of it. Here in the Americas, we have the IAI and FAPESP, that's funding your school. And we have also the NSF and the Research Council of Canada. So we are still trying to encompass more areas globally, and different institutions come to the table. And the idea of this framing of the Belmont Forum is that each funder funds its own researchers, but this is made through a unified process. So you put up just one proposal that is evaluated just by the same peer review process as everyone else, but you get the funds from your own institution and work collectively with others that are receiving from their institutions. It's complicated. It is a puzzle. And we recognize that this is really important, but this is really hard. Transdisciplinary science is already hard. Transnational science is already hard. And each of those processes have its own challenges. And then again, you have to have both to put a good proposal to the Belmont Forum. And so it's multinational and transdisciplinary. And they come together with the collaborative research actions. And these are some of the themes, so you can have an idea of the themes that were tackled by the collaborative research actions by the Belmont Forum. We had one in migration and mobility, one in climate, environment, and health, one that is being developed right now and will be launched in June 2024. I'm going to talk a bit more about this one, tropical forests, with FAPESP. And there is another one on oceans in scoping phase that should be launched in 2025 or early 2026. So I'm going to name just a few of the challenges of trying to put a proposal or even implementing a proposal for the Belmont Forum or one of these huge funding agencies for transdisciplinary science. One thing that is really common is the basic north-south disparities. I am previously, before joining the IAI 3 years ago, I was a postdoc at the University of São Paulo, funded by FAPESP at a Belmont Forum project. And our project had the same constitution as almost all the projects in the Belmont Forum. The coordination centers are located in Europe, and then you have 2 or 3 case studies based in the South. So you have the Brazilian case study, the Tanzanian case study, and the Southeast Asia case study in Indonesia. And we get to do the work with the communities, and the centers in Europe do all the coordination processes, all the decision-making normally, all the contract hiring, and controlling the project, in a sense. So this was one of the issues that the IAI was trying to tackle. These north-south disparities relate to how we fund projects and how the projects are being managed. The other challenges of developing these TD proposals also relate to the lack of skills in interculturality, communications, and the science policy interface. So it was pretty common, as we were talking about, that we got projects to fund that were a basic, common, mainstream project, a good one, scientifically sound, well-organized, but you could see that the participatory component was they tried to push it into an already existing research agenda of some of the scientists involved. And this could be seen as a lack of commitment from the part of the researcher, but it's also a lack of skills from the researcher, because we're not actually trained to know how to do that properly and how to include different stakeholders really democratically throughout the research process. There is a lot of confusion in participatory practices and transdisciplinary science. That you have already a research agenda, you have a research question, you have a research methodology, and then you go out there and show to people, so this is what I'm going to do, and you call that transdisciplinarity, and it's not. So we were trying to tackle those issues and produce, and that's why we're so excited that you're doing this, because this is exactly what you're doing for these folks here, right? And there is also this lack of understanding of what knowledge co-production really is. Anything that relates to the real world is being called knowledge co-production. There is a sort of buzzword-like process going on with transdisciplinary science. And then there are some real challenges of implementing TD proposals. One of them is the limited time and resources. As you get more and more to dive into what it is to produce a transdisciplinary project, many of you are in the PhD stage. You're going to see how limiting the time constraints are, because to build trust is something that takes time. And that's why the work of Cristiana and Cristina is that been in Vale do Ribeira and here for 10, 15 years, have these really strong transdisciplinary products. So we tend to fund research for longer. Also, to deal with conflicting perspectives and priorities. You're going to talk a lot about this in different, so I'm not going to dive into that one. Researcher positionality. The aligned and non-aligned partners that come in the way when you're producing, maybe a stakeholder that you envision to be really well aligned with the objectives that you had in the first place. Then when you get to practice, it's not really the case. And then the power asymmetries that come along. So how did we try to tackle those issues? How are we, as a funding agency, and also a place where capacity building is possible, how we are trying to tackle those issues. I'm going to offer one concrete example of how this happened over the last 2 years. So there was a Belmont Forum call on climate, environment, and health that was going through the scoping phase and was going to be open. And then the IAI, seizing the opportunity that we already had a lot of experience in capacity building and offering seed grants, we hosted a training program that was composed of 3 phases. One online course, one in-person workshop that looks a lot like this one that you're participating right now, and one seed grant process. So how did, and all of these institutions were involved in the process, and it came about already in the process of selecting the people that will participate in the process. I think Chris was mentioning this morning that about how the applications for this process can have some lessons learned for the other ones. This is something that we have learned also from this one, is that if you want to have non-academic stakeholders involved in training for producing research, you have to stop asking people for their CVs. This is something that we have learned. So the expressions of interest for our courses always have this double process. Researchers have to do one thing, and non-academic researchers have to do, and we call them researchers as well, but they have to do another form. And the form does not include the CV, does not include your publications, does not include, everything that you ask normally from an academic trying to get a place in one summer school or in one advanced school. And this is challenging because then trying to evaluate those individual applicants that come from the non-academic space is really hard because it's not the same metrics that you use, and each of the different stakeholders write different things that you have to try to tackle and encompass in different ways. So the process starts with this application that encompasses academic and non-academic stakeholders. And then people go through this online course. They go through a training that went during 3 months. There were meetings in Tuesdays and Thursdays, twice a week. We had a 2-hour online course. And during this process, the teams got together and got to work together. And this is really important, that we do thematic cohorts. Our cohorts are normally thematic because when you relate to, even when I'm speaking here, I realize that my speech here is really abstract. Even if I'm trying to put it into examples, it's hard to try to pass on the idea of transdisciplinary science without hands-on work on a specific subject. So our cohorts are always thematic. So in climate, environment, and health, we had people working in different subjects. And throughout the online course, the different groups merged, they met with each other. Non-academic stakeholders that were trying to reach out for research in a specific topic could relate to academics and vice versa. And then after this first training, where the TD foundational concepts and ideas were already at hand, they went to an in-person workshop in Neuquén, around 150 people. And there, they got time to work together on their projects, already having at hand the TD foundational concepts, TD Transdisciplinarity. I always use the acronym. And then they produce an actual project, and they submit the project to ourselves, to the same process so the institution, we have this flexibility that FAPESP doesn't have, and many of the institutions don't have, that we can provide both training and funding. So after this process, all the teams delivered projects, and the best ones of the projects that were delivered after the workshop got funding. But then the funding is a specific kind of funding that we call seed grants. The seed grants are aimed at developing the initial co-design process that is needed for transdisciplinary science. If you write a proposal that is too well written and too well done, without any kind of initial support to host in-person workshops, talk to the communities, talk to the mayor of the city that you're working in, it's really hard to come up with an actually co-produced, co-designed research question. So the idea of the seed grant is precisely that. So those seed grants were being implemented as the Belmont Forum project, that really hard one that you need. 3 countries, 3 people in each country, and 3 funding agencies. And this was being implemented, so people could use this money to produce a better proposal for the larger one. That are 4 years, $200,000 for each of the institutions putting money. So it's way bigger. And it was a really huge success in tackling those issues that I was talking about. All of the projects that were accepted in the pre-proposals phase for the Belmont Forum call that had leaders from the Global South were the ones that passed through our training program. So that says a lot, and it's global, okay? So it could have been that researchers from other countries in Africa, in Asia, could have applied, but they didn't. SPIs, okay, as the principal investigators. All of those countries, many countries in Africa and Asia were incorporated in other proposals, but normally as case studies, not as leads of the project. Only the projects that went through our training program had leads from the Global South. So, how is my time? 2 minutes. 5 to 10, she's kind. So we are trying to make, so this is something brewing. This is something that we are doing for the first time as we speak. This program that I'm talking to you about has been developed over the last 2 years, and it was the first time that we did it. And it is the first time that the Belmont Forum does that. And we are trying to gain scale and to produce ways to replicate this in wider terms. And one of the things that we are doing is to develop a virtual campus so we could host the online part of the course in an asynchronous way. So it's already available, free, open source, that people can take the course already. And that we can host the processes that are in person so we don't have to do that again and again and again every time that a call for the Belmont Forum comes out. So we are developing a curriculum in transdisciplinary science for global environmental change, and we are already seizing the previous contents that we have in our virtual campus. The course that we did for climate, environment, and health, it was synchronous, but we took the recordings and changed it and edited it so it became an asynchronous course. So I know there are like 3 or 4 people here that work in health issues. I really do recommend. It's really related, with the One Health approach that you were mentioning in your question today. And it's completely available, free, and it provides a certificate. You have to take a test online, and then you get a certificate for it. And you have also this other one that just came out about El Niño in the Americas, because this was a really strong problem this year for some of our countries. And now we are developing these 2 ones that are broader and that will both come out this year on transdisciplinary science and science diplomacy in the Americas. So to focus a little bit and to close in the transdisciplinary science one, these are the 4 modules that are going to be present in our curriculum. The foundational concepts of TD, the lessons from Latin America and the Caribbean, the difficulties and opportunities that come about on producing transdisciplinary collaborations, and how to design good projects in transdisciplinary science. So how can you plan your project management to be already aware of the time and the money that you're going to have to spend to make all the stakeholders to come together, to talk to the policymakers, to produce policy briefs, and not just plan to produce your normal papers. That's really important. And these are our partners, and the curriculum itself is being produced by researchers from the University of Calgary, Canada, JAWIC, Jamaican Women in Coffee, and the California State University, Long Beach. And these are all the partners that work together with us in reviewing the curriculum that's going to be launched. So to tease you a little bit, and since I read that many of you work on biodiversity and forests, so the next Belmont Forum CRA will be on tropical forests. And this call is going to be launched in June this year at the Sustainability Research and Innovation Congress that will happen in Finland, in Helsinki. We did, together with FAPESP and the Belmont Forum, a really strong transdisciplinary process of developing the text of the call itself. So we really do hope that the call text reflects the priority of the researchers and the communities working in tropical forests, especially in the Americas, but we also had some focus groups in Africa and Asia. And this is going to be launched in June, so the pre-proposals would be due towards the end of this year, and the full proposals towards mid-2025. And meanwhile, we are going to have one training program that mirrors what we did for climate, environment, and health. We're going to have a cohort of people. This call is going to be launched on April 18th, so If you're interested, please do follow us in our social networks. We are going to develop more or less the same process. We are going to have online phase, in-person phase, and sea grants towards developing better proposals. And we do hope that especially people from the Global South can apply. Unfortunately, we can only fund people in the Americas, so only American citizens, I mean all the America, can apply. But the course, the online course, will be available for anyone willing to take it worldwide. And the courses will be available in Portuguese, Spanish, and English. So if you are interested in any of those processes and want to know more, please do visit our website and take a look at our social networks. Thank you.
Yeah.